Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to give you some backstory onto our bus project and kind of explain why we ended up doing a bus and how we did it. So what I want to start with first is kind of how our jobs and careers led to the ability to take our work on the road. So I used to do construction. As soon as I got out of college, I was operating heavy equipment, managing construction projects, and it was very tied to one location. We would work really hard during the summers, and then we would have a little bit more time off in the winters. But yeah, you had to stay around. My wife, on the other hand, I started dating her my senior year in college, and she ended up working for a company in Minneapolis. So she was about 4 hours away, but with the goal of becoming remote when we got married, because I had to stay in South Dakota. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and we are going to get married in April of 2020, and then COVID hit. So her office went fully remote, and so she got to come out to South Dakota. We did end up getting married a couple of weeks earlier than we thought, with a small ceremony. And then, we were renting from my parents' house, and I still had my job. I was hoping to transition to something else, but I didn't have anything. No opportunities were available to me at the time. And then one night I was browsing Indeed and found a job opportunity or job opening for a company out in Massachusetts to do computer modeling for construction, which was right up my alley. So I applied and got the job. And the day that I accepted the job offer, I was like, wow, I'll be remote, because they weren't going to require me to be in Massachusetts. So that's when the seed got planted in my head that we could do this. So after I accepted the job offer, Emily and I started kind of really taking the idea of living in a bus actually seriously. We originally thought maybe doing a pickup camper and doing it that way, but it wasn't quite our style. And she has always really loved Instagram and had been following a couple bus pages, and it was kind of planting the seed in both of us that maybe we could do that. I grew up doing welding and construction and house remodels and all that, and it was kind of right up my alley because we had just finished remodeling the house that we were living in at the time. So, but the biggest factor was I had to make sure that my new employer that I was going to do training with in a couple of weeks was ready or willing to do it, to let us do this, and then Emily's employer was. So I had to do a training for just over a month in Massachusetts to kind of get up to speed. And within the first week, I asked my new employer if I could be fully remote and travel around, and he was fine with it. So that was awesome. So that basically just left Emily's work, which is they're a much bigger engineering company, and we didn't know for sure if they would allow it, but her supervisor said it was awesome. So that started our planning process. So we were stuck in Massachusetts for this training for like a month and a half. So we had plenty of time in the very small Airbnb to, one, practice living in a tiny house, because that Airbnb was about the same size as their current bus. And two, we were able to plan and prepare to purchase things on Black Friday. So it was basically my second job when we were out there was doing research on basically every component that we were going to be buying in the bus and how we were going to do it, and make a list of like 3 to 4 different options for each thing. So just for instance, our solar panels, I had like 3 different sources for the similar panels that were different suppliers, and we're going to wait for Black Friday and see which one is going to be cheapest and go from there. So we got all that done. We also had some giant grid paper that we were able to cut out little shapes of our like queen size bed, full size bed, king bed, toilet, sinks, basically every little part that was like a known size, known dimension. We basically cut those out, made a bunch of copies of them, and then we were making like various layouts. And we didn't show each other our layouts. We did like 5 layouts each, and they had to all be unique and different. And then we came together after that. We kind of mashed them all together and came up with something close to what we have now. But even after we started the project, it kind of morphed and changed. But that was great. By, I would say, the end of November, well, I guess Black Friday, we knew our layout, we knew what appliances we were going to get. So when Black Friday came and Cyber Monday came, we went to town. It was our biggest shopping spree ever. We bought pretty much everything we could think of at the time for the bus. And we probably saved, on average, like 10 to 15% overall. So it was worthwhile. There are some things that we bought that we didn't know at the time what we needed, or that what we bought was going to be wrong. So like we did, one of the examples of that would be we had an Amazon sourced inverter, and it wasn't quite what we needed because like right now we have a really nice split phase 240 volt inverter. But at the time we didn't know any better, so that's what we ordered. So there's a few things that were mistakes, but I think overall we came out on top doing the Black Friday shopping, so I'd highly recommend that. Kind of at the same time, we're looking for buses. So for us, I wanted a full-size bus, so like a 40-footer bus. I originally really wanted a Caterpillar engine and the Allison 3060 transmission, but and then I wanted it pre-emissions, so before 2004-ish would be what I was looking for, and then it had to be in decent condition. So there was a couple options, and there's a great company out of Phoenix, Arizona called AAA Bus, and they had some, it was like they had some 5.9 Cummins, they had some Caterpillar, they had the larger Cummins, all in like the 90s. And then I gave them a call, said, well, that one's sold, because I go through buses very fast. But I have this 2004 International with the DT466E and the Allison 3060, and it's an air-conditioned bus, so it has taller ceilings. So we kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit, but we ended up picking that one. I thought about going to auctions and trying to get a bus. Yes, you can save some money, but I just started a job, so I didn't have much time off, and I needed to get something to get started. So we decided to go through this AAA bus, and the owner, Tony, super helpful, super knowledgeable. He steered me to a great bus, and yeah. So I verbally accepted the purchase of this bus, got some plane tickets, and flew down to Phoenix by myself. I basically packed a bag that had a carry-on that had a sleeping bag, camp mattress, basically just to live in the bus on the way back up to South Dakota. Flew down there, got a hotel room. Next morning comes, take a taxi out to this bus dealer and take a look at the bus. And it is exactly what he said it was. It didn't have any leaks. It was mechanically sound. No giant air leaks. It was in pretty good shape. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when we were talking online, he's like, for another $100, we'll pull all the seats out except for the bare minimum, like first row or so of seats. So he did that for us. I don't know if he still does that, but that was amazing. We didn't have to pull out basically any of the seats. So the ones we did pull out were gross, but we'll get to that later. Basically, buy the bus. It was $7,000 plus tax, and I think we did pretty well on it. If you really wanted to get a crazy deal, you could go to the auctions, look at the buses, then you have to get them going. You don't know if they're going to run. These at least have been running. They're somewhat mechanically sound. He at least goes through them a little bit. We go on a test drive, he drives it, I'm listening to the engine, sounds great. So we buy the bus, and hands me the keys and says, okay, good luck. So I throw my carry-on in the bus and take off. Just getting into a bus in Phoenix, Arizona, and trying to get out of town was interesting. I got there, but ended up leaving. I got out of Phoenix around 1 or 2 o'clock Mountain Time, and I went up to Flagstaff and over to Albuquerque. And by the time I got to Albuquerque, it was dark. So I figured I'd take a nap or sleep, and then we'll get going in the morning because I had the whole weekend to get back home. Parked in a truck stop. I slept for probably an hour and got up and started driving. Set my GPS, and I figured, well, if I'm tired, I'll stop and sleep. Well, it turns out when I set the GPS, I only lost like a half hour over the next the whole trip back to South Dakota. So I was flying. The bus was light because it didn't have any seats in it, so I could easily do 80, which was the top speed on most of the interstates. And yeah, it drove really nice. It was really fun. It was actually pretty zippy without the weight, so I enjoyed it. Didn't stop at all until we got home. Got home right at dusk. Once I knew I was close to South Dakota, I only left just a little bit under a quarter of a tank by the time I got back to the shop. That way we didn't have a giant fuel tank sitting full while we were working on the bus. But it was kind of nice that I didn't have like 80 or 100 gallons of diesel sitting in a tank. I just had like 20 or 30. So I brought it back to Mitchell, and my uncle, who I used to work for, has a heavy equipment shop, and he was kind enough to allow us to use that winter to do all the metalworking, and his shop is amazing. It has really tall ceilings, it has heated floors, so it's nice and warm normally, and he has the most amazing, they're truck lifting jacks. So it's basically it looks like a pallet jack, but you put it under each wheel and it lifts up to 6 feet or almost 6 feet-ish, maybe 5.5, and gives you the ability to work on the underneath side of the bus without crawling around on the ground. So that was a game changer. We were able to just finagle the bus kind of into the back of the shop so he could still work on stuff, because the winter time is when they're in the shop getting everything ready for the next year. But it turned out that it was a decent winter, so they were out working most of the time, so we weren't. It's only like a couple weeks where they were packed full in the shop working while we were working on the bus. The first thing we did before we pulled it completely in the shop is we pulled it into their wash bay and pressure washed the bus as best I could on the underside. I wish I had taken more time to do this. Every single surface was just covered in red dust. So when you're working under there and hitting something, hammering, there's dust falling down. So word of advice to you guys is to, even with a garden hose, just crawl under there and just wash everything as best you can before you start. That way, being under the bus will be less miserable. It won't be not miserable, but it'll be less miserable. So after we got it pressure washed, we were able to kind of 3-point turn it, but even where it was, we had to kind of finagle it going back and forth to wedge it into a spot that was about 55 to 60 feet long and way in the back of the shop. And that kept us out of the way of all the guys when they're working on equipment. They could still pull trucks in and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the story of getting our bus and kind of why we got our bus. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video.